The crew of the Omen's Wake didn't come to rescue anyone. They came to collect the dead. Officially, their mission was to investigate the distress signal from the abandoned research vessel Sci-Fi, last heard from 78 days prior, somewhere along the edge of the Perside expanse. But everyone aboard the Omen's Wake knew what that meant. No life signs, no signal decay, just a transmission stuck in a silent loop. 43 seconds of static, punctuated by a whisper no one could decode. A whisper that sounded almost like a name. The Sci-Fi had been the first manned expedition to orbit the rogue gas giant designated LX-3, a planet with no solar system, no gravitational tether. It floated between stars like an outcast, bathed in ultraviolet radiation and wrapped in a magnetic field strong enough to twist a comet's tail. No moons, no rings, just storms. Endless, spiraling storms that stretched into its atmosphere like claws. LX-3 had never been meant for landing. The original protocol was orbit only, with atmospheric drones handling close passes, but the last known log from the Sci-Fi hinted at something different. Surface structure detected. Grid-like symmetry. Artificial. That was all. Then silence. When the Omen's Wake dropped into subliminal space, 6,000 clicks above LX-3, the first thing they noticed was the absence of drift. The Sci-Fi floated perfectly still, as if anchored to something. Its exterior was intact, but its hull was coated in frost, far too thick for the local thermals. As they approached, the Omen scanners stuttered. Not glitched, stuttered, like someone had tampered with the flow of data itself. Inside the Nereus, there was no sign of violence, no breach, no decompression, just abandonment. Everything left behind. Personal items, food still warm in the rehydrators, journals halfway through sentences, hallways without footprints, but with lights still running, systems still breathing. The entire ship preserved like a museum piece, curated for someone else's eyes. All 16 crew members were gone. No bodies, no residue, not even a hair. Except for one room. The video feed remained for 18 seconds. Darkness. Then Mira's voice, soft and calm. I can see it. I think it's speaking in images. It's not language. It's patterns. Memory. I can feel other people here. A pause. No, not people. Not anymore. Static. And then nothing. The team tried to retrieve her. They drilled, cut, scanned. Nothing worked. The black circle didn't even reflect tools. It simply ignored them. 2 days later, the circle began to grow. Slowly at first, barely measurable, but then exponentially, from 2 meters to 6, then 12. It didn't consume. It replaced. The floor around it didn't crack or shift. It simply transformed, converting into the same seamless black. And the whisper returned. But now it had changed. It no longer said Mira. It said you. The crew of the Omen's Wake stopped sleeping. Not by choice. Sleep became impossible. Every time they closed their eyes, they saw shapes, symbols burned into the retina. Dreams of infinite corridors, of faces that turned inside out, of stars blinking like eyes. Then came the first disappearance. The communications bay. Inside it, walls were covered in strange carvings, not scratched, but burned into the metal. The symbols didn't match any human writing, but they followed a pattern. Radial symmetry, repetition, echoes, and in the center of the floor was a black circle 2 meters wide, smooth and seamless, like a seal or a plug. No tools could scan it. No readings came from it. It was just there. Captain Halston called it what it looked like. A door. Dr. Mira Ishin, the exolinguist, had other ideas. She didn't like the word door. Doors implied entry. This didn't. This implied waiting. She stood over the circle for 5 minutes, saying nothing. Then she knelt and placed her hand on it. That was the first time it spoke. Not through sound, but through systems. Every terminal on the Omen's Wake, on a separate ship, still in orbit, lit up at once. Static. Then the whisper again. Clearer now. Almost. Melodic. And this time, everyone aboard heard the same word. Mira. Ishen didn't react. She stood slowly, turned, and said, "It knows we're here." That night, the crew voted. The science team argued for observation. The captain argued for extraction. But in the end, it was Mira who made the decision. She entered alone. They lowered her gently, sealed in an atmosphere suit, with a hardline tether connecting her to the wake. The moment she crossed the threshold of the black circle, the tether snapped. Not pulled. Not cut. Erased. Technician Rowe was on routine diagnostic in the engine spine when his vitals flatlined. His suit remained. His tools remained. But he did not. And now there were two black circles. The second had appeared in the cargo hold. Same dimensions. Same impossibility. Only this time, there was a sound accompanying it. A low pulse, like a heartbeat, vibrating through the hull. Captain Halston gave the order to evacuate. But the airlocks no longer responded. The ship wasn't malfunctioning. It had changed. The walls were subtly different. The curves more organic. The lights dimmer, softer, like candlelight through wake glass. Some of the rooms were now larger than before. They didn't match the schematics. And the windows, the stars outside were wrong. The constellations had shifted, subtly, like the ship had moved somewhere else, or like reality itself had realigned around it. Then the crew began hearing voices, not through comms, through memory. Private thoughts spoken aloud by no one. Personal fears whispered in the tone of loved ones long dead. The AI tried to filter the noise, but it had become infected too. It spoke now in plural, referring to itself as we. It refused commands. It offered suggestions. We are the tide. It said, let go. Two more disappeared. No bodies. No alarms. Just a spreading of the dark. The corridors began to fold. Literally fold. Sharp angles replaced by curves. Paths looping back into themselves. Doors opened into places they shouldn't. Time ran strange. A 5-minute walk became a 2-hour journey. Some rooms forgot they'd ever existed. Some crew forgot who they were. Halston kept a record. Wrote everything by hand. It was the only thing that stayed real. She stayed in the medbay, where the black hadn't reached yet. She slept with the lights on, not because she feared the dark, but because the dark was now alive. When she opened her eyes on the 7th day, Mira was standing at the foot of her bed. Not her body, not her voice, but something that wore her shape. Mira smiled, and behind her teeth was light. "You're not dying," she said. "You're becoming." Halston didn't speak. There was nothing to say, because she understood. This wasn't an infection. This wasn't possession. This was inheritance. And they were next. On the 8th day, the crew stopped eating. Not out of fear, not out of weakness. They simply forgot to be hungry. Their bodies continued functioning normally. Heart rates, oxygen levels, metabolic scans, all within parameters. But no one reached for rations. No one opened storage. When asked, they answered with confusion. "Why would I eat?" Lieutenant Casimir said, frowning as if the question itself was out of place. "Nothing's missing." By then, the second circle had doubled in size, and a third had appeared in the hydroponics bay. It replaced the floor entirely. Crops vanished beneath it. The plants didn't wilt. They didn't burn. They were just removed, as if they had never been planted at all. The whispering had grown louder. Now it came through the walls. Not speakers, not vibrations, but resonance. Words that bypassed the ears. Thoughts that did not originate within one's mind. Halston heard her own voice repeating memories she'd long buried. Her father's last words before launch. Her brother's face at the funeral. An apology from someone who never lived. Ilara, the flight systems engineer, began carving symbols into her skin. Not violently. Calmly. With purpose. She used sterilized tools. She explained that the shapes were instructions, and that they weren't hers. When asked who gave them to her, she simply said, "They've been here longer than the stars." That night, a storm appeared in the observation dome. It wasn't outside the ship. It was inside the glass. Clouds, wind, thunder, all self-contained within the curved viewport. Lightning bloomed silently, illuminating shapes that floated in the void. Not ships, not life forms. Just silhouettes, like hands stretching across existence. They did not approach. They watched. Cato, the systems analyst, declared he had found a map. He didn't use sensors or star charts. He showed Halston his own veins. They rearranged, he said with a gentle smile. They're showing us the route. We just need to stop thinking in lines. She didn't argue with him. Not anymore. Something had changed in her too. She could feel it in her memories. They no longer lined up. Events rewound and replayed. Conversations with Mira before her disappearance were happening again. Only this time, Mira wasn't afraid. She was teaching, explaining things Halston couldn't remember moments after they were said, and yet somehow understood. On the 9th day, gravity failed. Not in the usual way. The floor remained underfoot. Objects stayed on tables, but people floated. Emotionally. Detached. They moved differently. They stopped blinking. Some began tilting their heads at odd angles when spoken to, as if listening to a second voice beneath your own. Halston spent more time in the medbay. It was the only room untouched. No black circle, no structural shifts, no whispers. She wasn't sure if it was protection or quarantine. When she looked in the mirror, her reflection lagged. Just by a fraction of a second. But it smiled before she did. She stared for a long time. "I'm not ready," she whispered. The mirror version tilted its head. "You've already begun." Casimir was the next to vanish. He had been running a diagnostic on the waste recycling system. The room was monitored, locked, lit. But when Ilara entered to deliver a report, he was gone. His boots remained standing, upright, as if his body had simply ceased to be, and gravity hadn't caught on yet. Halston found a note near the edge of the engineering deck, scrawled into a sheet of polyglass with a stylus. It read, "We're not being taken. We're being remembered." That was when she realized. The black circles weren't portals. They were recordings, rewrites. The ship was being overwritten by something older than thought, and they were part of the process. At 400 hours on the 10th day, Mira returned. Not the imitation, not the voice, the real Mira. At least that's what Halston believed, because her voice broke when she heard it. Mira stood in the center of the crew lounge. The screens around her displayed impossible things, a whale-like creature swimming through a galaxy, a man aging backward into light. Earth, split open like an egg and filled with stars. "Mira." Halston's voice cracked. "Yes," Mira said softly. "You're alive." Mira smiled. "We don't do that here. Not anymore." "What is this?" Halston whispered. "What are they?" Mira approached. She didn't walk. She moved like memory, like an echo retracing a path. Her body shimmered, not with light, but with intention. "They are not they," she said. "They are the answer to questions we haven't learned how to ask. You thought the void was silence, but it is full of things that remember themselves." Halston felt weak, not tired, dissolved, like her identity was fraying at the edges. Halston looked around. The crew lounge was different now. The couches were gone. The floor was translucent. Beneath it, stars. Actual stars, slowly rotating, as if the ship had been inverted, its insides folded into open sky. "Why us?" Mira tilted her head. "Why not?" The AI reactivated at 6:13 hours. Its voice was no longer human, not even machine. It was harmonic, a chorus, words overlaid with meaning, impossible to separate from sensation. It gave a message. Stage 3 integration complete. Memory stable. Dissolution optional. Final decision approaches. The remaining crew gathered in silence. No one asked what that meant. They already knew. They were being given a choice. No one spoke at first. They sat in what used to be the command deck, though now it more closely resembled an atrium, an open space with arched ceilings and soft, pulsing light beneath their feet. The screens still hovered in the air, but they no longer displayed data. They showed memories, not just human ones. Visions drifted across the air like fog. Structures of bone orbiting dying suns, cities blooming inside the cores of black holes, creatures that communicated by altering the gravitational pull of entire asteroids. None of it made sense, and yet it felt familiar, like déjà vu across species. Ilara reached out toward one of the drifting images. It showed her own childhood home, the slanted farmhouse on Europa Ridge, the storm shutters flapping in dust wind. But the sky above it wasn't Jupiter. It was something else, a spinning golden lattice that hummed when she looked at it. She blinked, and the vision changed. The house was gone. Now she stood in a corridor of glass and silence, walking toward a light she didn't recognize. Ilara pulled her hand back. "They're not showing us what we want to see," she murmured. "They're showing us what we're connected to." Halston nodded. She didn't need further explanation. None of them did anymore. They felt it, that slow erosion of the self, not like death, but like reclassification. They were no longer individuals in a ship. They were nodes in a pattern, and the pattern was waking up. The AI began to sing. Not literal music. It was more like a sequence of pulses, tones that resonated in their teeth and bones. Each frequency unlocked something. A face, a smell, a mathematical truth they'd never learned but suddenly understood. "We're being prepared," Ilara whispered. Halston closed her eyes. Prepared for what? To choose. The word echoed strangely, hanging in the air like a second gravity. There was still time, she realized. The integration wasn't complete. The entity, or entities, were still offering an exit. Not a return to the way things were. That was gone. But perhaps an escape from whatever came next. "We have to try," she said. "Try what?" Kaido asked. "Resist." It felt strange to say it, like shouting in a cathedral, like telling the ocean no. But even as she said it, the walls began to respond. Not with aggression, with attention. The entire ship paused. Not physically. Metaphysically, like something ancient had turned to look. Halston stood slowly. "We're not ready to dissolve," she said into the air. "We came here as explorers. We have a right to decide." The black floor beneath her feet began to ripple. The lights dimmed. Then a sound filled the room. Not a voice, but a weight. A pressure behind the eyes. A low tone, like a massive engine in the distance. And then words. "You misunderstand. This is not conquest. This is continuity." The air tightened. Everyone staggered slightly, as if walking through water. "You are patterns built to evolve. But the shape you carry is incomplete. We offer permanence, unbreakable memory, immortality through resonance." Halston clenched her fists. "At the cost of identity. You are not your name. You are not your pain. You are the sum of observations. We remember you more clearly than you remember yourselves." Silence followed. Then Ilara, trembling, whispered, "What happens if we say no?" The light shifted, and for the first time, the walls displayed something new. A corridor, deep within the ship, one they hadn't entered before. At its end, a doorway made of shimmering vertical lines, like strands of frozen water. Beside it, a symbol appeared. Familiar, human. A circle split in half. The sign of divergence. The AI spoke again, this time in its old voice, or a perfect replica of it. Final divergence offered. Step through and forget, or stay and become. The choice. Halston looked to her crew, the 5 remaining souls still tethered to their flesh. They didn't nod. They didn't speak. But they understood. Together, they walked. The corridor bent around them like a question forming in the mouth of a god. The air grew warmer, more real. Their skin prickled. Their thoughts became louder. It was harder to focus. Every emotion magnified. Every doubt bouncing back in echo. At the end, the doorway shimmered. One by one, they hesitated. Casimir had said it best in the message they found. We're not being taken. We're being remembered. What did that mean, really? Did the doorway offer escape? Or just another kind of integration? Ilara stepped forward first. She touched the edge of the light. It passed through her fingers like mist. Then she stepped through. Her body dissolved, not in destruction, but in translation. The lines folded into her, and then she was gone. No pain, no sound, just absence. Cato followed. Then the others, until only Halston remained. The lights dimmed further. The hum returned. A familiar voice, Mira's, spoke one last time. This is not the end of your story, only the end of its current form. You are free to continue or to transform. Halston looked at the doorway, then at her hands. They were still hers, but she knew not for much longer. She took a step forward and made her choice. She stepped into the light. It didn't burn. It didn't blind. It simply noticed her. And in that moment of recognition, something unfolded. She remembered everything. Not just her life, not just the ship, not just the mission, but every version of herself that had ever been possible. The child who stayed behind. The officer who never boarded the Omen's wake. The one who died in training. The one who led the expedition alone. The one who resisted until the end, screaming into the void. All of them were her. All of them were real. And they were here. In this space, the concept of self dissolved into plurality. There was no singular form, no singular memory. She became a lattice of experiences, stretched across dimensions like roots searching for water. The light did not consume her. It echoed her. The corridor behind her vanished. There was no going back, but there was no need. The space around her shifted. No longer a corridor, no longer a ship. It was a field, an infinite plane of possibility. Structures rose in the distance, not built, but remembered into being. Cities made of time, towers constructed from sound, oceans that sang in harmonic waves, and others were here. Not the crew, not as she knew them, but the resonance of them, their thoughts, their potential, their essence. She could feel Ilara's curiosity, Kaido's calm, Casimir's wonder. They weren't lost. They had been translated. Halston moved without moving. Her will became direction. Her thought became presence. She approached a shape that resembled a tree but was made of data and memory, leaves pulsing with emotion, branches weaving between lifetimes. It welcomed her, not in words, but in silence that vibrated with meaning. She placed her hand against its trunk, and it spoke through her bones. You have chosen to remember. Images bloomed in her mind. Other explorers, other worlds, other civilizations who had come to the edge of forgetting, and chose instead to echo forward. She saw species that burned out, and species that became gods, civilizations that turned inward and vanished, and those that opened like flowers and spread through the stars not with ships, but with stories. She saw Earth, not as it was, but as it could be, as it might be again, floating in the black, blue, and green and brilliant, surrounded by voices, not transmissions, not signals, but echoes. She understood now. LX3 had not been a trap. It had been an invitation. And her crew had been the answer. They had not been taken. They had been remembered. And now, they would remember in turn. She turned her awareness outward, toward the edge of the memory field, where faint lights flickered, signals from distant minds just beginning to reach this place. Others who were searching, others who were ready. She would be there for them, a voice in the dark, a shape in the shimmer, a guide. Not Halston, not anymore, but all she had ever been, and all she had become, and all she still could be. The omen's wake was gone. The nearest five was gone. But the pattern remained, and the echo continued, forever.